Hey everybody, hope you're doing great today. In today's video, I want to talk about the buyer's representation agreement. So in a recent interaction I had with an online lead, basically with my online leads that come through my website, it's a cold lead, meaning they found my website, we never met before, and they're just asking questions about a certain house. In this case, the buyer wanted to tour the home. So when I mentioned to her that there is a buyer's representation agreement, that I was going to set it up as a no-cost agreement, we could set it up for a real quick one-day thing, she wasn't interested in signing it. So when I explained this is a legal requirement and this is the way it would work, in order to help her get in to see the house, there's no obligations, no commitments, no requirements there to work with me in the future. It's just a matter of helping her get into the house. So unfortunately, she was not happy with that, was frustrated with the process. So we did decide to go our separate ways. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to help her, which is fine. Not everybody can work together. And as you can see with this process over here that I'm about to describe, it's best to work with an agent, and both obligations from the buyer side as well as the agent side are set in an agreement. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the recent changes, basically where they separated the buyer and the seller's agent, where in the past, where the seller's agent would get a listing agreement with the seller, and sometimes out of that agreement, they would also pay the buyer's agent. So under the recent settlement that the National Association of Realtors did about a year or two ago, they separated that process. So basically, when the sellers go get a listing agreement, they can't put anything in the listing agreement about compensating the buyer's agent. The buyer's agent needs to negotiate that separately, either with their buyer or with the seller. So as a result of that, what a lot of states have done in adopting those rules is now they require buyer's agents, such as myself, that when we're taking somebody on a showing, we need to have them sign a representation agreement that says, hey, this is how much the buyer will pay for my services if the seller doesn't pay. So there's a lot of different language that goes in these contracts. It covers compensation for the buyer's agent. It covers what happens in the event the seller pays commission or doesn't pay commission, or they pay less commission than is in the buyer's agreement. So there's a lot of legalese in these documents. So understandably, first-time buyers or new buyers who've never met an agent before, they don't feel comfortable with that agent, and that agent presents them with literally a 5 to 7 page buyer's representation agreement. In one of my MLSs, they have a pretty long agreement. It is about a 5 to 7 page. I don't remember the exact number. I've got access to other MLS forms, and that one has a 2-pager. Obviously, if you're, as an agent, you're meeting this buyer for the first time, and then you present them with this 5-page document, a lot of red flags goes up. They're thinking they're signing away their life. They don't know what it is. There's a lot of legalese in there. So it can be a pretty daunting thing for the buyers to see, and a lot of them hesitate, which I perfectly understand. If I didn't have the knowledge I have and being on the other side, I would also be hesitant as well too. So part of it becomes meeting with the agent, getting comfortable with them, getting familiar with them, and then being willing to sign those agreements. So in the past, prior to these rule changes, that's the way I would do it. I would take the buyers out, show them a few houses or two. If they felt comfortable and wanted to keep working together, we kept working together. And then when it came time to make an offer, that's when we had the representation agreement signed. And I actually preferred that way because I could go meet these buyers. It became more my choice. We had the option at that time to have a buyer's representation agreement. And I could have said to every buyer at that time that you have to sign this before I can take you to any showing, whether it's my rule or my broker's rule, however it worked. That could have been a requirement. I opted not to. I was willing to go meet a buyer, take them to 1 or 2 homes. If they felt comfortable, we liked each other, they felt comfortable with me, then I build a relationship that way. This one kind of restricts that a little bit in the sense that now I have to build that rapport beforehand, and it's not always easy when you never met this person before. They're ready to see a house, but they're not ready to sign any agreements. So these agreements basically, just as I mentioned before, they cover how the buyer and their agent are going to work together. So the forms can be long, as I noted. So what you as a buyer should be doing is finding your agent, calling up your agent. For example, if you're purchasing in Cincinnati here or Northern Kentucky, getting in touch with me and say, hey, I need to see a couple homes here. Can you help me out? And then let's meet face to face if you happen to be local. If not, let's set up a Zoom call, let's set up a video call, chat. We can talk about each other's goals and whatnot, and then we can discuss the buyer's representation agreement there. So there's some rapport being built. So that's the process that I use these days. But if you're reaching out to me, my first preference is to let's set up a personal meeting where we can meet, chat, and see if we can work together, and then go from there. We'll discuss the agreements, discuss how I can help you out, what you're looking for, and go from there. So as a buyer, when you do have that question or confusion about signing these documents, so it's like I mentioned, it's completely understandable too, as noted that many states have made these a legal requirement for the buyer's agent now, that prior to any showing that they have to have a buyer's representation agreement signed. So I've done it a couple times too, where it's a new buyer and I'll tell them, hey, I understand you're hesitant, you want to sign a long-term agreement. I can sign an agreement just for one day, and then you agree me to pay. And then I set it as a zero fee agreement. Basically, you're not paying anything. I'm just taking you to go show you the home. And then later on, we can decide, okay, yeah, I like working with this person. I can sign for a little bit longer time than one day. So while these are a legal requirement, agents should be asking their buyers to sign these after explaining them fully. There is a chance, though, you could find an agent who does not necessarily enforce that rule, that law, requiring their buyer to sign this document to set up that representation agreement. So the problem I see with that, though, is maybe they're willing to bend the rule for this one time or this couple times just to get to know the buyer. Let's not worry about signing this document. Let's just go show the house, and then maybe they get along with me, and then we'll sign. I can have them sign something later, as it was done in the past. Problem with that, in my opinion, is that if you start to see somebody who's willing to bend the rules a little bit in the beginning when it benefits them, in case these days too, the market's slower, a lot of agents aren't getting clients, so hey, let me just bend this rule because I need a buyer. And so if this buyer happens to come, they throw up the red flags, I'm not signing anything, I'll take you out. Okay, I'll take you out to see the house. No agreements, no questions asked. So the problem becomes then when it comes down to, okay, this buyer now is like ready to make an offer, they're ready to take the next step. This agent already bent the rules in a slight way initially to benefit themselves. Down the line, when they've already shown that they're ready to bend the rules, when push comes to shove, maybe the deal's going to fall apart, something else might go wrong. Can you as the buyer then trust that agent to make sure they're representing your best interest? In my opinion, I would say no. If it were me, I would not be able to trust that person to represent my best interest. I would not sign them in the first place too, that they bent the rules just in order to get the introduction, get the buyer into the house, and then hope that they make an offer there. These are expensive transactions. Buyers are putting down a lot of money. They are buying a home that they're going to be in for a while, that if they get stuck in the wrong home, it can be very expensive to live in there, maintain, repair, cover the home, and especially then you hate the home for whatever reason because things didn't work out properly during the transaction process. There could be a lot of buyer remorse, which is something, in my opinion, work with somebody you can trust, build a rapport as a buyer, talk to the agent. Yes, they're going to want a buyer's representation agreement. In my opinion, you should be saying, yes, I do want to sign that agreement with them, but because that also binds that agent to you as the buyer. It basically sets out the rules that the buyer is going to operate under. And you know that they're operating above board, since the first steps you're taking, you're making sure that there's an agreement in place. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Are you currently in the process of buying a home? Have you been presented these buyer representation agreements? If not, did that surprise you, that knowing now that it's a legal requirement for realtors to present these to their buyers? And if they did present that buyer representation agreement to you, what did you think about the process that agent went through in order to get you to feel comfortable working with them? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.